The story begins with an event that took place several months ago. A girl was live streaming herself baking sweet bread, telling her viewers that the smell was amazing while the chat filled with excited comments. She showed the camera how soft and bouncy the bread looked before ending the stream, leaving her audience eager for the next recipe. Satisfied with how it turned out, she called the session a success. Just then, her friend entered the room and asked if she was ready to leave, reminding her that they had an appointment and were running late. The main character, Ajin, quickly changed into her outdoor clothes, apologizing for forgetting and asking if her friend planned to turn the guy down. Her friend reassured her that it would be fine. The boy was from their school, and she just needed to reject him politely to avoid any awkwardness. She even joked that he might turn out to be the perfect guy. Choi, her friend, was used to receiving confessions. She was beautiful, and while people usually acted nice at first, some didn't take rejection well. That was why Ajin decided to come along as her bodyguard. Ajin waited nearby at a park and texted Choi to let her know she was watching from a distance, telling her to call if anything seemed wrong. Although Ajin felt slightly reassured that the boy was a fellow student, she stayed alert. Choi texted back, thanking Ajin and promising to wrap up the meeting quickly, to which Ajin simply wished her good luck. While waiting outside, Ajin noticed the weather had turned freezing. She was searching her bag for a hand warmer when a tall stranger suddenly approached to ask for directions to the cultural sports center. Ajin checked her phone and suggested he take a bus instead of the subway. The man told her not to rush and mentioned that a broadcast was being filmed at the center. Before he could finish, Ajin interrupted to give him the exact bus number. Then, without warning, he placed his hand on her shoulder and commented that she looked pretty up close. Ajin looked visibly afraid as the man kept talking, asking if she wanted to be an extra in his broadcast and telling her to come with him for a camera test. Keeping his hold on her, he added that she might meet celebrities at the filming site and asked again if she was interested in going. His sudden shift in tone made her freeze. Paralyzed by fear, she couldn't speak or move. Before she could react, another man stepped in and grabbed the tall stranger's wrist. The stranger struggled but couldn't break free, demanding to know who the newcomer was. Ajin felt a wave of relief as she recognized the guy, who asked if she was okay. The tall man grew furious, yelling at the newcomer for interfering and telling him to let go. Instead, the young man twisted his arm and slammed him to the ground, leaving him crying out as he hit the pavement. Moments later, the police arrived and led the tall man away while he shouted the entire time, claiming he wasn't a molester. Overwhelmed by the situation, Ajin began to cry. Through her tears, she insisted she would never fall for a camera test scam. The guy who saved her interrupted, telling her that if she couldn't use her hands, she should have used her feet. It was then that she recognized him, Park Junu, a top student from her school. Even though she didn't know many people, she certainly knew of him. Still crying, she thanked him for stepping in, confessing that she thought she was going to die of fear and asked why he happened to be there. He simply smiled and replied that it wasn't any of her business, though since he had saved her, she could do him a favor. She agreed right away, not wanting to be in debt to anyone. He laughed and revealed he just wanted to borrow her power bank, a request that caught her off guard. She hesitated, as it was her favorite item, but he explained that he was watching a basketball game when his phone died right at the most important part. She tried to decline, saying she was about to head home, just as her friend spotted the two of them outside. Meanwhile, Junu kept pressing her, saying that if she didn't want to owe him, she should just hand it over. Inside the cafe, the boy sitting with Choi asked for an answer to his confession, but Choi didn't respond. She kept staring through the window at the two people standing outside. After a brief pause, she stood up, telling him it wasn't the right time to talk about it and that she needed more time to think. She gathered her things, explained that something urgent had come up, and told him she would see him at school before leaving the cafe. Outside, Ajin was still asking Junu how much longer he needed the power bank. He told her to wait since he hadn't even plugged it in yet. Just then, Choi came over, grabbed Ajin by the arm, and told her it was time to go home. Junu watched the two girls as they walked off, not quite understanding what was happening. Choi gave him a quick smile as they left, wondering if he might be connected to the boy who liked her, and if so, whether he could be useful to her in the future. Choi kept pulling Ajin along without saying much. Eventually, Ajin asked what was going on, wanting to know why Choi was in such a hurry and reminding her that the power bank had been left behind. Choi smiled and said it was nothing serious, explaining that her mom kept calling and wanted her home quickly. Ajin gave her a hug and asked how things went inside the cafe, to which Choi replied that she would explain everything on the way home. The next morning, the girls said goodbye to each other before heading to their respective classes, agreeing to meet again at lunch. While walking down the hallway, Ajin realized she hadn't slept well because she kept worrying about her power bank. She wondered if she should have left it at home, as it felt almost like a family heirloom to her. In class, a group of girls stood by the window gushing over how handsome Junu was, mentioning they had enrolled in the school just because of him. Ajin walked past them and entered the classroom. Looking at Junu surrounded by fans, she thought that kind of attention must be exhausting, though he didn't seem to care. She walked over and spoke quietly, asking if he remembered her and if he had brought the power bank. Junu stood up and admitted he had left it at home, but offered to buy her a better one. Ajin panicked and said that wasn't necessary, explaining that the old one was special and asking him to bring it the next day. As she looked at him, she began to wonder if he even realized it was broken and not working at all. Junu started to reply with a simple, "All right," but before he could finish, the teacher walked in, nodding that the bell had already rung, and instructed everyone to take their seats. Later, during lunch, Ajin and Choi sat together to eat. Choi asked if Junu had promised to bring the power bank tomorrow, and Ajin confirmed she had reminded him clearly. Choi then suggested that she could meet Junu after school to collect it on Ajin's behalf. Ajin seemed surprised and asked if that would be too much trouble, but Choi smiled and said it was no problem at all. After school, the weather changed suddenly and it started to rain. On the bus, a few girls were glad they had brought umbrellas. Junu pressed the stop button to get off, unaware that Choi happened to be on the same bus. She sat quietly, thinking about how she had always wanted to get closer to him and never expected Ajin to be the one to make it happen. As she stared at Junu's back, she pondered how to speed things along. Her plan was simple. She hid her umbrella inside her bag and got off at the same stop as Junu. When he opened his umbrella and stepped out, she followed quickly and called his name. Catching up, Choi introduced herself as Ajin's friend and cheerfully explained that Ajin had sent her to pick up the power bank. Junu looked a little surprised, saying he had planned to return it at school the next day, but Choi insisted that Ajin wanted it back as soon as possible because it was important to her. Junu agreed and invited her to walk with him. After walking for a while, Choi asked if his house was still far away. He stopped in front of a long wall they had been walking alongside the entire time and told her to wait out front. Choi asked if the wall belonged to his house, which Junu confirmed. Realizing the massive size of his estate, Choi smiled to herself. He was rich, smart, and good-looking, checking every box for a perfect boyfriend. Trying to sound playful, Choi mentioned that she had gotten caught in the rain, felt cold, and hinted that it might be nice to dry off inside for a bit. She made an effort to look pitiful, hoping he wouldn't turn her down, and added that she regretted not bringing an umbrella. Instead of inviting her in, Junu simply handed her his umbrella, told her he'd be right back, and walked inside, leaving her standing outside. Choi was stunned, annoyed by the situation yet accepting it, reasoning that if he were too easy, it wouldn't be as interesting. The next morning, Ajin was at a convenience store feeling hungry, having overslept and missed breakfast. She picked out a few items totaling less than $5, but at the counter, the cashier informed her that her card had insufficient funds. Surprised, Ajin realized she had already spent her allowance for the month. As the line behind her grew, an embarrassed Ajin asked to charge only the banana milk, but the card still wouldn't go through. With people in line complaining about the wait, she asked to cancel the order entirely. Just then, someone behind her offered to pay. She turned around to see Junu, who paid for her items without hesitation. They left the store and walked to school together. To break the initial awkward silence, Ajin thanked him and promised to pay him back the next day. Junu told her not to worry about it, reminding her that the matter with the power bank wasn't settled yet. Ajin realized he wasn't as cold as he seemed and had been thinking about returning it all along. He teased that if he hadn't bought her the food, he would have had to listen to her stomach growl all day. Meanwhile, Choi watched them from a distance, unable to understand why they were together or why they seemed to be getting along so well. Back in the classroom, Ajin immediately asked Junu if he had brought her power bank. He told her that her friend had already picked it up the day before. Relieved, Ajin smiled, glad to hear Choi had it and planning to collect it from her later. After class, as Ajin and Choi were walking upstairs together, Choi suddenly mentioned that she no longer had the power bank because Junu had thrown it away. Ajin looked confused, remembering that Junu had just told her the exact opposite. Choi then asked directly if Ajin was choosing to believe Junu over her. Ajin replied with frustration. It wasn't about choosing sides. She just never thought Junu was the type to lie, and she couldn't understand why he would say something completely different. Still feeling down about the loss, Ajin was comforted by Choi, who reminded her that she knew how much the power bank meant to her. Ajin remembered the moment her father had given it to her for her birthday, a memory that made its loss feel even heavier. Choi acknowledged how precious the charger was. But later, when she was alone in her room, she questioned why Ajin was so attached to something so cheap that didn't even work well. That was the moment Choi decided to tell Ajin not to get close to Junu. The next morning, Ajin prepared to confront Junu, though she wasn't sure how to approach him since he didn't seem very interested in talking to her. Meanwhile, Choi grew tired of hearing Ajin talk about the portable charger, questioning why she cared so much about something from a person she barely knew. Choi reminded her that the charger barely worked and that she might never see the person who gave it to her again. Ajin responded that Choi already knew how important it was to her, but Choi quickly changed the subject, asking to borrow a blanket because she had forgotten hers. When Ajin entered the classroom to get the blanket, she noticed a group of classmates gathered around her desk. Curious, she walked over and asked what was going on. One of the girls asked if it was Ajin's birthday. Someone had left a wrapped gift on her desk, but Ajin was confused. Her birthday wasn't today. She opened the box and was surprised to find a pink portable charger inside, looking just like the one she had lost, complete with her name engraved on it. She wondered who could have left it. At first, she thought maybe Choi was trying to cheer her up, but that didn't make sense since they had come to school together. As classmates commented on how pretty it looked and wondered if there was a note inside, Junu entered the classroom and asked Choi to move aside so he could pass. Choi greeted him in a cheerful, cute tone, but he ignored her completely. Noticing his cold response, Choi realized Junu might be the only guy in school who didn't react to her charm, figuring it was because he only cared about studying, though she thought that was still better than someone who flirted with everyone. Around Ajin, classmates began whispering and wondering if she had a secret admirer. Ajin quickly denied it, though she was equally curious about who had left the gift. At his desk, Junu watched Ajin closely, paying attention to her expressions. Choi noticed his gaze and grew suspicious, though she refused to believe he could actually like Ajin. To change the subject, Choi brought up the blanket. Ajin apologized for the delay, handed it over, and asked if they could meet during lunch. Before walking away, Choi glanced back at Junu again, but he appeared fully focused on his studies. Soon after, the teacher entered and announced that the next class would be first aid training, a practical lesson on saving lives held at the school court. While standing among the students, Ajin couldn't stop thinking about the charger, wondering if Junu could really have given it to her. Despite Choi's claim that he had thrown the old one away, and Junu's claim that he had given it to her friend, Ajin still had doubts and didn't know who to believe. The teacher began demonstrating chest compressions on a dummy, and after a few rounds, instructed the class to split into pairs to practice. Ajin quickly turned to a girl beside her, but the teacher explained that they needed boy-girl pairs, joking that two boys practicing together might damage the dummy. Growing nervous, Ajin wanted to avoid partnering with Junu, but the teacher noticed her hesitation and paired them up since they were standing nearby. As they began, Ajin kept her distance while Junu demonstrated proper technique on the dummy. The teacher complimented his form, then asked why Ajin wasn't participating. Junu invited her to give it a try. Ajin started practicing, clearly nervous, but Junu quickly noticed she was barely applying any pressure and joked that the dummy was already dead. Embarrassed, Ajin insisted that wasn't true, but Junu teased that if the dummy were a real person, they wouldn't have survived. When Ajin explained she was afraid of pressing too hard and hurting someone, Junu reassured her that it was a common concern, nodding that broken ribs sometimes happen during real emergencies because saving a life is more important. The teacher watched approvingly until another instructor called him over. It was starting to rain, meaning they had to share the court with another class. Soon, the second class arrived, including Choi, who immediately spotted Ajin and Junu practicing together. Following instructions, Ajin pushed harder on the dummy's chest, but the sensation and sound made her uncomfortable. Junu laughed at her reaction, offered to show her the proper technique, and reached out to guide her hand. Caught off guard, Ajin lost her balance and fell right on top of him in a scene that looked like something out of a movie. The teacher quickly stepped in, reminding them to focus on first aid rather than flirting. While the rest of the class laughed, Choi stood to the side, clearly irritated that Ajin hadn't listened to her warning to stay away from Junu. Later in class, Ajin tried to figure out why Choi seemed upset and asked if she was feeling okay. Choi claimed her stomach had been hurting since the night before and that the physical activity had made it worse. Ajin offered to take her to the infirmary, but Choi refused, saying she just needed a short nap and suggested Ajin go eat lunch. In truth, Choi couldn't stand looking at Ajin's face any longer. She asked Ajin to go to lunch alone and pretend they were together, claiming she just didn't want Ajin to skip a meal. Touched by the gesture, Ajin agreed and told Choi to rest. Meanwhile, Choi was focused on finding a way to create distance between Ajin and Junu, hoping the new charger hadn't come from him. At the cafeteria, Ajin felt uncomfortable sitting alone. Before long, Junu and his friend arrived. Without waiting, Junu pulled out a chair, sat next to her, and handed her his sausages. His friend looked on, annoyed, as the sausages were the best part of the meal. Ajin assumed Junu was doing this out of guilt over the lost charger. Trying to lighten the mood, Junu joked that she needed to eat more and get stronger, especially after falling on top of him during training. Embarrassed, Ajin protested that she only fell because he pulled her so suddenly. Junu's friend grew suspicious, knowing it was completely out of character for Junu to talk to girls, let alone share his food. As Ajin ate, she pondered how to bring up the new charger, feeling both glad not to be eating alone and uneasy about relying on anyone. The next morning, Ajin left home late and barely caught her bus. As expected, it was crowded with no empty seats. That's when she spotted Junu sitting quietly. Memories of falling on him and his teasing at lunch came rushing back, making her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She silently resolved to ignore him completely, pretending he didn't exist. Suddenly, the bus driver announced an accident ahead, warning that traffic was backing up and passengers needed to move to the back to clear space at the front. Ajin hesitated to move closer to Junu, but the driver scolded her, telling her to move back like everyone else. Junu let out a chuckle at the scene, making her feel even more flustered. Humiliated, she inched toward the back, trying to act invisible. Junu pointed to an open spot near him and casually offered, "You can stand here." "There's room." Reluctantly, she took the spot just to avoid another scolding. Junu considered offering her his seat, but before he could, the bus made a sharp turn. Everyone staggered, struggling to keep their balance, and Ajin lost hers entirely, stumbling right into Junu's lap. The silence between them shattered. Her eyes went wide, and so did his. In a panic, she scrambled up, but in her rush, her head smacked against his chin. They both winced in pain. "Sorry," she blurted out, red-faced. "I didn't mean to fall on your thighs." Junu managed a soft smile, trying to hide his own fluster. He had caught a faint, sweet scent from her hair, something soft and familiar. "It's okay," he said. "It happens." They both avoided eye contact after that. Finally, the bus rolled to a stop outside the school, and everyone began filing off. Ajin and Junu walked behind the others, keeping a small distance between them, but she couldn't wait any longer. Taking a breath, she turned to him. "Hey," she said, "was it you who left that charger on my desk yesterday? I mean, I didn't think it could be anyone else, so thank you. It's really pretty." He looked surprised for a second, then offered a genuine smile. "I'm glad you liked it," he said quietly. "I bought it for you. I figured it was the least I could do." Ajin blinked. Wait, so you didn't throw the old one away? Junu shook his head. It was already pretty much broken, so I just thought I'd get you a better one. I felt responsible. She stared at him, puzzled. That didn't match anything Choi had told her. Why had Choi said he threw it away? Ajin's thoughts tangled, and somewhere deep down, something began to shift. Deciding not to press further, she smiled and thanked Junu again, saying she would definitely use it a lot. Across the street, Choi was watching. Seeing the friendly atmosphere between them made her increasingly jealous and irritated. In her mind, Junu should be interested in her, not Ajin. Frustrated, Choi quickly messaged the boy who had confessed to her earlier, asking to meet up. Caught off guard but excited, he thought she might finally be giving him a chance. She also asked him to bring a friend, claiming her own friend was really into him. It was all part of her plan to create the perfect setup to get closer to Junu. When the day of the meetup arrived, Junu stood in front of the movie theater waiting for his friend, sending a message to ask if he was on the way. Just then, he heard a voice call his name. It was Choi. She walked up with 2 drinks, a coffee and a soda, offering them casually. Junu looked confused, asking why she was there and why she had brought drinks. Choi explained that they were about to watch a movie together, but Junu replied that he wasn't watching anything with her, adding that his movie was about to start and she should leave. While he tried calling his friend to understand the situation, the friend, Hyungmin, picked up and quickly apologized. He explained that he had agreed to go out with Choi's friend because he liked her, but to make the meetup work, Choi had suggested Junu pair off with her so they could watch the movie as 2 separate couples instead of a group. Junu looked even more confused and told his friend that Choi was already standing right there with him. Before he could finish, Choi grabbed the phone and ended the call. She admitted everything, telling Junu that she had planned this because she liked him. She even confessed that the story about picking up Ajin's charger was a lie made up just to get a chance to talk to him. Now, she stood in front of him waiting for a response. It finally dawned on Junu. The entire situation had been orchestrated by Choi. Before he could say a word, she asked what he thought of her, saying she wanted him to get to know her better. He didn't answer. Instead, he calmly asked for his phone back. Choi refused, saying that if he was hesitant because of Hyungmin, she would fix things by rejecting him. She looked at Junu again, asking directly what he felt for her. He stayed quiet, and for a moment, Choi believed his silence meant he was seriously considering her feelings, convinced he would say yes. But then he broke the silence, his voice steady and firm. "I don't like you." Those 4 words hit her like a slap. Her smile faded instantly. No one had ever rejected her before, and she wasn't used to hearing no. Shaken, she tried to recover her composure, her instinct urging her to cry and make him feel guilty. Tears welled up in her eyes as she asked, "How can you reject me without even thinking about it?" Junu didn't flinch. He told her there was nothing to think about because he was sure of his feelings, and he asked for his phone again. She still refused to give it back, pleading with him to take more time and give her a chance. But Junu's patience had run out. He pushed her hand away and warned her not to touch him. "If you want to keep the phone, then keep it," he said coldly, turning away. Stunned, furious, and humiliated, Choi stood alone outside the cinema. Her pride couldn't handle losing like this. She called out after him one last time, trying to draw him back. "Take your phone." He turned around slowly, his eyes filled with frustration. "I don't like you. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not interested in you," he said. "The only thing I want is for you to reject Hyungmin properly and apologize." That should have been the end of it. But as Junu walked away, Choi stood frozen, looking down at the drinks in her hands. In a sudden outburst, she dropped them to the ground, splashing coffee everywhere, and screamed as if the hot liquid had burned her. Just as she predicted, Junu turned around and ran back, concerned, asking if she was okay. Choi clutched her wrist and cried harder, sobbing that it hurt. Junu quietly ran to the nearest pharmacy, returning minutes later with bandages and burn ointment. As he treated her fake injury, Choi was thrilled inside. Even if he didn't love her, he was still showing her kindness, which meant there was still a crack she could slip through. Attention was currency in her world, and she wasn't done playing yet. For the first time, Choi felt like she was truly falling for someone. As Junu focused on wrapping her hand, she mentioned that her heart was racing because he was holding her hand. He quickly stood up, let go, and said he was leaving. Choi believed he was just embarrassed and didn't know how to handle his feelings. Before he walked away, she handed him his phone and quietly apologized for her earlier behavior. He said nothing, simply turning and walking off while she stayed behind, completely smitten and convinced he was just flustered. But she was mistaken. Later that day, Ajin rushed over to Choi's house, deeply worried about her friend's injury. Choi, still lying down, asked her to lower her voice, claiming she had a severe headache. Ajin noticed the bandages on Choi's hand were applied poorly and asked to take a closer look, but Choi quickly pulled her hand back, remembering Junu had wrapped it and wanting to keep it untouched. Ajin assumed her friend was just in pain, and Choi added that she didn't want anyone touching the burn, reminding herself to be more careful so her real feelings wouldn't slip out. Choi quickly changed the subject, asking about the delicious smell coming from what Ajin had brought. It was a small bun Ajin had baked after hearing about the injury as a gesture of care. Choi smiled, saying she loved Ajin's homemade buns and suggested they go to her room to eat and watch Netflix, planning to keep acting sick so Ajin would do everything for her. She claimed her hands still hurt and asked Ajin to set the table. While setting things up, Ajin noticed the trash bin was in the way and moved it aside, but something inside caught her eye, a flash of pink. Looking closer, she spotted her old portable charger with her name engraved on it. Confused, she turned to Choi and asked why her charger was in the trash. Distracted by admiring her bandaged hand, Choi realized too late that she had forgotten to empty the bin, and now the evidence sat right in front of them. Ajin couldn't understand how the charger had ended up at Choi's house if Junu hadn't thrown it there. Choi froze, silently scrambling for an excuse, before claiming she had found the charger in Junu's trash. She explained that while passing his house, she saw something pink in the bin, recognized it, and took it because it felt wrong to leave it there. According to her, it was cold-hearted of Junu to throw it away, so she had decided to retrieve it for her friend. The explanation didn't hold up for long. Ajin remembered that Choi hated touching anything dirty. Seeing her suspicion, Choi pushed the story further, insisting she only grabbed it because she knew how much it meant to Ajin, doing something she hated purely out of love for her friend. She added that she hadn't returned it earlier because she couldn't remember where she had put it, pretending to feel hurt that she was being questioned by someone she cared about. Still slightly unsure but wanting to trust her friend, Ajin gave Choi a hug, accepting the explanation and thanking her for going through the trouble to help. The issue was dropped, and things returned to normal. The next day at school, the teacher announced a new project where students would have to work in pairs. To avoid any issues, the teacher explained that the pairs had already been assigned. Though the class grumbled, the teacher asked them to check the list before complaining. Everyone rushed to the paper, eager to see who would be paired with Junu. It turned out to be Ajin. Some students called her lucky since Junu was known for being top of the class, while a few girls felt openly jealous. Ajin, however, wasn't excited. She still felt awkward around Junu after everything that had happened. Walking up to him, she asked when they should start. Taking the lead, Junu said they needed to set a time soon due to their tight semester schedule, and they agreed to meet on Saturday. Saturday arrived with clear weather and blooming spring flowers. Ajin thought it might be nice to hang out with Choi after finishing the assignment. Arriving early at the bustling cafe, she found a seat and began organizing her things on the table. While adjusting her setup, her hand bumped into her cup, nearly tipping it over. She caught it at the last second, but the sudden movement created a chaotic mess. Holding the cup in one hand and her laptop in the other, she felt on the verge of dropping everything when Junu suddenly appeared, catching the cup before it hit the ground. Surprised and embarrassed, Ajin watched as Junu told her to go wash her hands while he called someone over to clean the table. Though she felt responsible and wanted to clean it herself, he was already walking toward the counter, repeating that she should just wash up. While washing her hands, Ajin received a message from Choi saying she couldn't meet because of a modeling job. Impressed by her friend's cool career, Ajin felt motivated to do her best as well. When she returned to the table, the mess was gone, everything was spotless, and Junu had even bought her a banana smoothie. She thanked him, and he noted that she always seemed to be drinking something banana-flavored. She simply replied that she really liked bananas. Sitting right next to her instead of across, Junu teased that he wanted to keep an eye on her in case she got clumsy again. A bit embarrassed, Ajin reassured him that while she wasn't the best at studying, she always pulled her weight in group projects and wouldn't be a burden. Junu smiled, told her to open her laptop, and added that he was impressed she remembered to bring it. Though it felt like he only showed up to tease her, Ajin appreciated his help. Elsewhere, Choi finished her modeling job and headed out, not wanting to go home so early. Looking for plans, she noticed several unread messages from Hyungmin, who had been trying to reach her after she lied about being sick to avoid the movies. Debating how to handle it, Choi sent a harsh, direct message saying she liked someone else and didn't want him contacting her anymore. With no other plans, Choi remembered the cafe Ajin had mentioned and decided to drop by. Arriving at the location, she spotted Ajin sitting with a guy whose back was turned to her. Shocked that Ajin's assignment partner was a male classmate, Choi paused to fix her makeup and apply lip gloss before walking over. Meanwhile, Ajin was quietly amazed as Junu wrote the entire assignment in fluent English without needing a translator. Suddenly, Junu's phone rang. It was Hyungmin, clearly upset after just being rejected. Junu looked annoyed, easily guessing that Choi hadn't handled the rejection gently. Hanging up, Junu told Ajin that an emergency had come up and he needed to leave. Since most of the work was finished, he told her to handle the design portion. Ajin agreed, eager to do a good job since he had done the heavy lifting. Still pretending to check her makeup nearby, Choi overheard Junu on the phone saying he was heading to another friend's house to meet Hyungmin. Only then did she realize the guy sitting with Ajin had been Junu all along. Instead of revealing herself, she sat silently at a table behind Ajin. When Ajin eventually stepped away to use the restroom, Choi saw a chance to cause trouble, thinking that if the project files disappeared, Junu would get a bad grade and grow upset with Ajin. She tried to open Ajin's laptop, but it was password protected. After multiple failed attempts using Ajin's birthday, Choi tried one last combination, her own birthday. To her surprise, the laptop unlocked. Realizing Ajin used her birthday as a password stirred an unexpected feeling, reminding Choi that her friend genuinely cared about her. Softening her sabotage, Choi deleted everything except the first and last pages instead of wiping the entire file, arranging the screen so Ajin would send the email without double-checking. Choi felt a thrill envisioning Ajin's shock when the mistake was discovered. The next day, the teacher opened class by addressing the assignments, noting that some groups failed to submit their work despite the deadline affecting their grades. When she read off the missing list, both Ajin and Junu were shocked to hear their names. The class began whispering in disbelief. Junu was top in English, so it made no sense for him to miss a deadline, leading many to suspect Ajin was at fault. Ajin quickly spoke up, explaining that she had sent the file and asking the teacher to recheck. The teacher confirmed a file was received, but asked if Ajin had reviewed it before sending. When Ajin opened the document, she was stunned to find only the cover and end pages. Junu's entire portion of the work was missing. As classmates laughed and joked that they had spent all their time on the design, a panicked Ajin begged for an extension to resend it. Junu finally stepped in, apologizing to the teacher and explaining that there had been a mix-up, revealing he had just resent the complete file. Surprised that he still had a copy, Ajin listened as the teacher accepted the explanation, but insisted on fairness for the rest of the class, requiring them to present their assignment live. Nervous about speaking on the spot, Ajin was reassured by Junu, who told her she only needed to slide the pages while he spoke. As soon as Junu began presenting in fluent, effortless English, the classroom fell dead silent. The teacher looked pleased, and even Ajin was blown away by his skill. When the lunch bell rang, Ajin stopped Junu before he could leave, expressing how impressed she was by his impromptu speech and apologizing for the file mix-up. She offered to make it up to him, but before Junu could reassure her, Hyungmin interrupted to drag Junu off to lunch. Left alone, Ajin remained determined to find a way to thank him. Meanwhile, Choi searched the school looking for Ajin, expecting to find her miserable and blamed by Junu. To her irritation, Ajin was cheerfully deciding what snack to buy Junu as a thank you, gushing over how he had saved the presentation. Choi's plan had completely backfired. Out in the courtyard, Hyung-min confessed to Junu that he couldn't get over Choi, admitting his heart still raced whenever he saw her despite her brutal rejection. Junu warned him not to get his hopes up, but Hyung-min brushed it off, claiming Junu didn't understand love and planning to use the upcoming school trip to win her over. As Hyung-min rambled on, Junu quietly recalled the moment Choi had confessed her feelings to him. Hyung-min told Ajin to drop the idea and focus on studying, reminding him that a drop in grades meant losing his phone. Hyung-min didn't care, insisting love was more important than school, and that Junu wouldn't understand since all he did was study. He added that Junu didn't even have anyone he wanted to see the spring flowers with, a comment that made Junu pause as his thoughts drifted to Ajin and how impressed she had looked during the English presentation. Meanwhile, Choi was growing increasingly regretful. Her attempts to sabotage Ajin had completely failed, seemingly only bringing Ajin and Junu closer together, and Ajin's complete disregard for her warnings left her furious. Returning home exhausted with a headache, Choi was greeted by the sound of her parents fighting. Her father was demanding a divorce because he had found someone else. Overwhelmed and aggressive, her father told her mother to sign the papers, stating she would do as he wanted regardless. When Choi challenged him by asking if he planned to abandon the other woman too, her father slapped her across the face. Her mother stood up, ordered him out, and refused the divorce. As her mother tried to comfort her afterward, a bitter Choi pushed her away, calling her worse than him for letting things go this far, before locking herself in her room. Staring at a box of sweets Ajin had sent with a caring note, Choi knocked them to the floor in frustration. Convinced that everything always worked out for Ajin while nothing went right for her, she resolved to channel all her anger into destroying Ajin. That night during a private tutoring session, Junu couldn't concentrate, his mind repeatedly flashing back to the spring flowers and Ajin. When his tutor noticed his distraction and asked if he was interested in someone, Junu blushed while thinking of Ajin, though his tutor quickly pulled him back to the lesson. At home, Ajin was busy baking cookies in the kitchen to share on the upcoming school trip. Her parents returned home, praised her thoughtfulness, and her father happily handed her some extra spending money. While packing her bag, Ajin placed her portable charger next to the new one and recalled a memory from a year ago at a university camp. Back then, she had tried to convince her uninterested roommates to stay up, but they dragged her along when they tried to sneak out at night. Caught by the hallway lights, a sharp and direct instructor's assistant stepped in to stop them. Completely smitten by his calm demeanor, Ajin had found the courage to ask for his number. They talked daily until he got a girlfriend, which shattered her heart and made her realize she was just a camp student to him. Looking at the charger, she realized it hadn't been a gift from her father at all. It was from him, her very first crush. In the present, that same former crush was on a university campus, telling students he had accepted a teaching internship at Sarin High School. The day of the school trip finally arrived. While other students complained about the nearby destination, Ajin was focused on finding Choi, who showed up dressed in a striking crop top clearly meant to attract attention rather than relax. Ajin scolded her for showing too much skin, but Choi brushed her off. Suddenly, the crowd quieted as Junu appeared in casual clothes, instantly drawing the attention of surrounding girls who rushed over to ask about his train seating. Meanwhile, Junu's friends were preparing for the trip with alcohol, planning a nighttime hangout in Ajin's room. Spotting an opportunity to get closer to Junu, Choi immediately piped up and asked Hyungmin if she could join, thrilling him instantly. Once settled on the train, students took photos and chatted, though Choi shrank back into her seat to avoid the cameras. Earlier that morning, her mother had handed her an envelope of spending money from her father, which Choi angrily threw aside, refusing to accept anything from him. In a different train car, a warm Ajin grew uncomfortable in her long-sleeved shirt and headed to the vending machine. There, she ran into Junu buying drinks. When she pointed out the green apple drink he was holding as her preference, she realized there were none left. Without a word, Junu handed her the one he had intended for Hyungmin, who was currently asleep. As Ajin took the drink and thanked him, another student rushed by and bumped into her, causing her to stumble into one of those classic close contact moments. Knocking her glasses slightly off kilter, Ajin looked up at him, but Junu abruptly pushed her away. Confused and hurt, and remembering Choi's lie about him throwing away her old charger, Ajin demanded to know why he was always so mean to her. Realizing she completely misunderstood him, Junu blurted out on impulse that he liked her. Frozen with shock, Ajin asked why, to which Junu laughed and teased that he liked her because her reactions were always funny. Believing she was just the butt of a joke, Ajin cursed at him, hit him in frustration, and stormed off despite his attempts to call her back. Sitting by herself in tears, she felt humiliated and toyed with, wondering if his kindness at the cafe had all been a lie. Upon arrival at the destination, teachers gathered the students to lay down ground rules and a 6:00 p.m. curfew before letting everyone disperse. While looking for Junu, Choi was cornered by a group of local playboys who hit on her and demanded her phone number, refusing to let her pass. As panic set in, Ajin suddenly appeared, shouting that teachers had forbidden talking to outsiders, grabbed Choi's hand, and bolted. Once they were safe, Choi laughed it off as a minor encounter with older teens, surprising Ajin with her casual attitude. That night at the lodging, Ajin's roommates waited for their group to arrive. The door swung open to reveal Hyungmin and his friends carrying a stash of drinks, followed by Choi, and finally, Junu, a lineup that left the girls in the room far from thrilled to see Choi. Ajin, still unaware, hadn't even noticed Junu in the room. He hadn't come for the party or the gathering, which he usually disliked, but strictly to apologize to her for the misunderstanding on the train. When Ajin finally noticed him, her mood immediately plummeted, while the other girls grew excited. As everyone settled down with snacks, heavy tension lingered between Junu and Ajin. Hyungmin suggested playing Truth or Dare, but just as they were about to start, loud knocking echoed from outside. Fearing it was an instructor, the group panicked. Some threw blankets over themselves while others scrambled into the bathroom. Ajin ducked under a blanket next to someone she assumed was Choi, who seemed to be pressing down on her head. Whispering for her friend to stop, Ajin was shushed. Seconds later, her phone alarm went off and illuminated the space under the blanket, revealing that the person pinned inches from her face was actually Junu. Both froze in awkward silence until the alarm stopped, before silently turning away. Ajin's heart raced as she fretted that Junu would push her away and laugh at her again, convinced he disliked her. When someone signaled the coast was clear and turned on the lights, Hyomin accidentally stepped on Ajin's glasses, breaking them. Junu sat up, pulled off the blanket and looked stern, not out of anger at Ajin, but out of sheer embarrassment from the close moment. A flustered Hyungmin apologized profusely, but accidentally called her Adek, a name sounding like a puppy, sending the room into fits of laughter. Ajin brushed it off, saying she would just visit the optometrist the next day. Resuming Truth or Dare, Choi drew a task to give a snack to someone she wanted to get closer to, intentionally picking Hyungmin to make Junu jealous. While Hyungmin was thrilled, Junu remained totally unbothered, though Choi deluded herself into thinking his blank expression masked extreme jealousy. Next, the bottle landed on Ajin and Junu. Hyungmin asked, "Are you interested in anyone in this room?" Both locked eyes silently before quickly looking away, Ajin realizing Junu had come to apologize rather than tease her, and Junu realizing she didn't actually hate him. The room buzzed over their silent exchange, but since neither answered, they were both handed a punishment: photographing the professor's office door late at night. Choi offered to take Ajin's spot, but Hyungmin shut her down. As Ajin and Junu left, classmates commented that Ajin looked much prettier without her glasses, infuriating Choi, who felt completely ignored and dragged someone else back into the room to keep playing. En route to the professor's room, Junu suggested taking a shortcut through the garden, but Ajin, cold, uncomfortable, and anxious, just wanted to get it over with. As Junu tried to apologize for the train incident, a hall monitor's voice echoed nearby. Instinctively, Junu grabbed Ajin's hand, and they bolted into a vacant room to hide behind a wall. Once the monitor closed a nearby window and stepped past, Ajin noticed their intertwined hands and quickly pulled away. Before they could clear the air, the monitor turned back around. To protect Ajin from getting caught or becoming the subject of rumors, Junu told her to stay hidden and stepped outside alone, pretending to be on the phone. Recognized as the school's top student, Junu received a gentle warning and a minor penalty point from the respectful monitor. Before leaving, Junu subtly kicked the door shut with his foot to hide Ajin from view. Watching from inside, Ajin felt guilty that his stellar record was tarnished on her account. When the coast was clear, Junu urged her to finish the mission and take the photo. When Ajin admitted she was worried about his penalty, Junu chuckled. Annoyed, Ajin accused him of constantly teasing her, adding that if he disliked her, he should just ignore her. Tension filled the air until Junu gently placed his hand on her head, softly confessing that no matter how much he joked around, he would never mistreat her and certainly didn't hate her, revealing that clearing the air was the sole reason he had come out there in the first place. Turning to walk ahead, he told her to hurry before they got caught again, leaving Ajin stunned as the truth of his feelings finally began to settle in.